The new Space Wolves are finally here, and to mark this occasion, I thought that I would tackle all 13 of the Space Wolf great companies and create a small conversion for each one to represent their unique personalities and approach to warfare. And to help me to do so, I'll be using the miniatures in the new Space Wolves army set, which was kindly sent to me early by Games Workshop. So let's kick things off with the Blood Maws. For nearly all of my 13 builds, I began with either one of the new Blood Claws or one of the new Grey Hunter torsos, and for the first of these, I settled on a Blood Claw torso. Although really, with the exception of a little more movement in the Blood Claws, there wasn't all too much difference between the two sets. After clipping away and cleaning up the parts, I could assemble the torso and the legs. Now, the Blood Maws are known to be particularly savage in warfare, even among the Space Wolves, and are suspected to have a higher than usual number of Wolfen among their ranks. To reflect this nature on the model, I decided to create a Marine that was just beginning to fall to the curse of the Wolfen. To represent this, I started out with some Blood Claw arms and some Wolfen hands. The new arms feature this hand mounting system where the back plate of the gauntlet is attached to the forearm, whereas the palm and fingers and weapon are usually separate. This did make it easier for me to hand swap though, as it was much more straightforward to clip away the plate rather than a whole hand. After removing the plates and gluing the arms to the torso, some Wolfen claws were then glued to the wrists. The result, when paired with suitably posed arms and legs, created that halfway point between an Astartes and Wolfen that I was looking for. I opted to not use a Wolfen head though, and instead stuck to one of the new regular Space Wolf heads, but chose more of a snarling visage. Then, taking some inspiration from the fully fledged Wolfen, I then attached a Wolfen knife and some skull trophies to the belt. The skulls did have to be clipped back though, so that they had a lower profile against the torso. But I wasn't done with the skulls just yet. To add that final touch, I mixed up a very small amount of green stuff, rolled it into an extremely thin strand, before further cutting up and placing it between the eye sockets of each skull. But before we continue with the great companies, let's first hear from the sponsors of this video, Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. If you're after fast-paced tactical gameplay, then Tacticus delivers Warhammer 40,000 action right when you need it. Perfect for when you're waiting for that glue to stick, or that last layer of paint to dry. In Tacticus, you can lead over 80 champions from 18 playable factions, including the Space Wolves, with Ragnar Blackmane taking center stage in my own arena team. There's nothing more satisfying than using his Warhowl to crank up your team's melee damage. As well as an extensive campaign, you can also fight alongside friends or take on other players in high-stakes PvP. Personally, I'm more of a co-op guy, and I enjoy teaming up with my guildmates to take on bosses in guild raids and push forward across the shifting battle lines of Guild War. The devs are constantly adding fresh content, events, and game modes. And speaking of fresh content, the Adeptus Custodes are arriving. Crafted by the Emperor himself, they're more than warriors, they're living demigods, each one capable of cutting down whole armies alone. In Tacticus, they're unbreakable melee powerhouses, absorbing damage like fortresses and dishing it back twice as hard, because after all, one custodian is worth 100 warriors. Make sure to mark your calendars for the Watchers of the Throne survival event running between the 24th and 30th of May. Followed by the Trajan Valorous Legendary event starting on the 1st of June and running until the 7th, and finally the Asoth Kumadra release event, which will be available between the 15th and 28th of June. Officially licensed by Games Workshop and with an average rating of 4.5 across the app stores, Tacticus is perfect for any Warhammer fan and can be played on both mobile and desktop. Check out the game for yourself by using my QR code on screen right now or my link below, and use my code CUSTODES for some in-game bonuses. You can also pick up some extra Blackstone by using my friend referral code U-61-NAP2. Now, let's get back to building those Space Wolves. Next up were the Sea Wolves, and for these I began with a Grey Hunter torso. Now, the members of this company are often recruited from the Kraken hunting warriors of southern Fenris. With both this background and the word sea being in the name, I decided to arm my Sea Wolf with a harpoon or boarding pike-like weapon. But before I could attach the weapon, the arm first needed to be prepped. So starting with a chainsword arm, I removed said chainsword before then drilling directly through the hand and across the palm. This hole created the perfect mounting point for this Atalan Rough Rider lance. The hole in the hand was steadily enlarged before the lance could be placed into the hand and kept in one piece. With the spear in place, both arms could be glued to the torso. When choosing a head, I opted to avoid any dedicated Space Wolf heads and instead selected this bald head from the Blood Angels upgrade sprue. As you would expect, the Space Wolf bear heads are all quite hairy, so if you're looking for something a little alternative that also features bared fangs, then this head would do nicely. To round out the model, I then attached some suitably nautical netting from the Ideneth Deepkin Akalian kit, along with a pistol pouch and some shoulder pads, completing the second great company. When it came to the Sons of Morkai, I wanted to represent both their no-nonsense approach to warfare and their preference to employ more Wolf Scouts than usual. This allowed me to explore how well the new components combine with the Phobos units, where I opted to build a Space Wolf Infiltrator by combining the torso of a Reaver with a bolt carbine taken from the Grey Hunters kit. I would also channel a little tactical energy from my Raptors build by arming this Wolf Scout with a silencer, and a good source for these attachments are the Grey Knight Interceptor backpacks. Before I could attach it, I first had to remove the muzzle from the bolt carbine. After clipping away one of the rods from the pack, I drilled a 1mm hole into both ends of it, as well as another into the bolt carbine, just where the muzzle had been. Into one of the holes in the silencer, I glued a short length of 1mm plastic rod and used this to help me mount it to the carbine. With the silencer in place, the carbine and arms were glued to the Reaver torso. The rest of the model was pretty straightforward and saw me attach a Grey Hunter Sergeant head, a Space Wolf pad to the left shoulder and a Phobos one to the right, and finally some chest-mounted grenades were added along with a Space Wolf knife. The Red Moons employ a large number of Longfang units in their company, and while the Space Wolves still have access to the Firstborn Devastator squads, I wanted another crack at the Desolation Marines. To do this, I started out with a Grey Hunter's torso and a Horus Heresy missile launcher, but before I assembled the launcher, I first clipped away the shroud around the muzzle. This isn't entirely necessary, it's just a personal aesthetic choice. The right missile launcher arm was then assembled along with a blank Mark 6 shoulder pad and a Mark 3 wrist plate to help bulk things out a little. As a nod to the skeletal beast known as the Wolf of the Red Moon, I selected one of the Age of Sigmar direwolf heads and removed the jaw as much of the fur as possible, leaving me with a wolf skull. I then compared this against the launcher and continued to make adjustments until it fit nicely above the muzzle. To finish this Red Moon Space Wolf, I selected an axe-wielding left arm and attached another Mark III wrist guard to it, just to balance things out a little. With a suitably aged head and a pistol holster attached, the model was complete. Which meant that I could focus on Logan Grimnar's own company, the Champions of Fenris. This particular company follows the belief that battles can be won by a few great heroes that are in the right place at the right time, and as such, employ many Wolfguard among its ranks. To continue this theme onto the regular rank and file, I opted for a more ornate, more elite looking battle line, and began this by first clipping away a Bloodclaw torso's belt. This was replaced by one of the Wolfen discs to create the effect of a more ornate looking belt buckle. The arms themselves were a fairly straightforward pistol and chainsaw combination, but for the shoulder pads I looked towards the Horus Heresy range and grabbed these Command Squad shoulder pads. These were then followed up with another Wolfen disc, this time used as a rondel, and a helmet taken from the new Head Takers kit. Not only does the Dwarf range create the perfect source of bits for a Salamander Kitbashed, it is also excellent for the Space Wars, as evidenced by this Ironbreaker's axe that I glued to the model's belt, along with a few more pouches. Which brought me to the Deathwolves. Now in the lore, the Deathwolves have a much stronger affinity with the beasts that often accompany the chapter into battle, and with this in mind, I opted to build a Primaris version of the Thunderwolf cavalry. I first began with an assembled Thunderwolf and a partly assembled Grey Hunter torso. After comparing the legs to the saddle, I made a few small adjustments to both the hip and to the inside of the legs. I continued to make comparisons and adjustments until I was able to glue the legs together in such a way that the Marine looked as though he was riding the beast. The effect was pushed further by combining a Space Wolf left arm with a Grey Knight Terminator closed fist and a bolt carbine being held at ease. The trick here is to make the pose look as natural as possible, otherwise the Marine will look like they're struggling to stay on a bucking bronco after downing several pints of mead. My adjustment to the legs had left me with an unsightly gap though. Now, I could have filled this in with a bit of green stuff and resculpted the segmented armour, but I instead chose to cheat and simply cover it up with a Thunderwolf cavalry shield and some pouches, completing this Deathwolf. Next up were the Stormwolves, who are known to enjoy the din of battle so much they opt to field more armoured units than other companies do. To represent this on an infantry model though, I had to get a little creative and build a Grey Hunter tank crewman. With this in mind, I effectively built a Tech Priest Light and decided to use the bionic arm from the Iron Hand upgrade kit. This was followed up with a Tech Marine shoulder pad from the Repulsor kit, which I placed over a Space Wolf pistol arm and opposite a Space Wolf shoulder pad. The Mechanicus-inspired stylings didn't end there though. The head I selected was the classic Mark 7 helmet from the Space Wolf sprue, along with more Iron Hand and Intercessor cogitator devices. The Duskwolves replaced the Iron Wolves and are technically a new company that have been added to the Space Wolf lore, but they do have origins in the 2nd edition Space Wolf Codex. This new company has very little background to go off at the moment, but there was a small tidbit of information that described them as being particularly effective at purging the corrupting presence of the Thousand Suns. As a fairly on-the-nose nod to this, I took this damaged Thousand Suns helmet from the Trophies kit, drilled a hole into the neck and attached it to an open-handed Bloodclaw arm. Once glued to the torso, the head appeared to have been wrought from the shoulders of a Rubric Marine. For the more subtle stylings, I imagine that the Duskwolves' successes against the Thousand Suns had been in part due to the effective warding against their corrupting sorcery. This would take the form of talismans and bone charms, which I created from more wolfen parts. I clipped the discs from this particular piece of chain before gluing it to the belt along with a Space Wolf necklace. This effect was continued onto the power pack with one of the wolfen trophy racks, which was clipped away from the section of the pack that it was attached to. To clear space for this on a regular marine pack, the small nubs had to be clipped away and the top smoothed out a little. With this done, I glued the skulls on top and added a few more pouches around the waist. The Drakeslayers were next on my list, and I began with a fairly straightforward axe-wielding right arm, Space Wolf shoulder pads, and a Grey Hunter's head. For this particular company, their personality lay in the smaller details. Known for their boasts and desire for glory in battle, it only made sense that the Drakeslayers would track down the biggest prey and take trophies to show off their deeds. To represent this on the model, I began with a Dark Elf Corsair cloak, which was cut down with a combination of a hobby saw, clippers, and knife until it could fit snugly beneath the right shoulder pad, where I glued it into place. What better way to reflect the more jovial side of the Drakeslayers than with a keg of strong alcohol? This I sourced from the Bretonnians and first removed the fleur-de-lis before then attaching it to the waist, along with a few more pouches. Like with the Deathwolves, Sons of Morkai and Red Moons, when it came to representing the Blackmanes, I thought I would again focus on a specialist unit type, specifically the Jump Pack Intercessors, or as they're known among the Space Wolves, Skyclaws. Specializing in planetary assaults, the Blackmanes are known to employ large numbers of Skyclaw packs. Fortunately for me, the Jump Pack Intercessors packs work quite nicely alongside the forward momentum of the Bloodclaw torsos and fit well with a little bit of adjustment. Being at the forefront of an assault, it only made sense that the Blackmanes would proudly announce their arrival with the blare of a hunting horn, and one of these was kindly provided by the Bretonnians as well. After gluing this to the belt, the rest of the model was bulked out with a little more equipment. My next company were the Runemarked, another new company who replaced the Fire Howlers. Again, at the point of making this video, there was very little in the way of background to these guys, so I took a little creative liberty. After starting out with a Space Wolf torso, gluing a necklace and some arms, I then made the strange choice of attaching a Dark Angel's head, particularly this hooded head. Now, in my mind, the Runemarked have the largest number of psychic sensitivity, with many rune priests being drawn from its ranks. To represent this innate sensitivity, I decided to build upon the hooded head with a raven. This was taken from the Ossiarch Bone Reaper cavalry set, but a single bird did have to be carefully cut away from the others and from the banner itself. This left me with a single bird on a perch. To attach this securely to the pack, I repeated my earlier steps of tackling the silencer and drilled a hole into both the perch and the pack. Instead of the plastic rod, I used some more steel wire and superglue to help create a stronger bond. I then finished off the model with a few pouches and extra pieces of equipment. When it came time to tackling the Grimbloods, their penchant for fire and flame-based weaponry led me to dipping into the Salamander's range of bits, where I sourced this flame pistol. While not strictly a weapon option available for the Bloodclaws, it could be fielded as a count-as plasma pistol. This was paired with a regular chainsword, Space Wolf head and shoulder pads, but when it came to sourcing more ammunition for the flame pistol, I had to dip back into the Horus Heresy range yet again and pick up one of these flamers. The canister was removed from it, cleaned up a little, and then glued to the belt. To continue with the flame motif, I then took the backpack brazier from the Salamander kit and one of the Space Wolf packs which featured one of the ornate symbols. The topper was removed from the Space Wolf pack, leaving just the mounting point, and the brazier was also removed from its base. Then, much like I did with the Runemarked perch, I drilled 2 holes, glued some wire, and pinned the brazier to the backpack. Which brought me to my final company, the 13th Lost Company of the Space Wolves. Now, I've always had a soft spot for these guys, as they were heavily featured in the Eye of Terror campaign that ran around the time that I first got into Warhammer. As such, I was keen to recreate that salvaged Chaos armor aesthetic that they had back then. To do this, I began with a Chaos Space Marine bolter arm and removed the arm, so I was left with just a hand and the bolter. The hand was then removed from the Space Wolf arm, and after a little comparison and adjustment, I glued the new bolter to the arm along with a chainsword arm. Continuing with the salvaged equipment, a Chaos Space Marine shoulder pad was placed over the left arm and a regular Space Wolf pad adorning the right. After attaching a Space Wolf head, I decided to push that scavenger armor even further by using a Chaos Space Marine backpack too. And with that, my final Space Wolf was complete, and I was left with these. I got that dog in me, yeah, turn me up. Big energy, got the crowd going nuts. I got that dog in me, yeah, any up. I take on anyone, I don't need a one-on-one. I got that dog in me, yeah, I'm talking all right, no park. I could rip your squad apart. I got that dog in me, so what's up? Yeah, so what's up? And so that concludes my great company Kitbashes. While I didn't have time to cover the painting of these guys on top of all the conversion work, the schemes I went with were fairly standard, but I did opt to use the Colour Forge's Wolfkin Grey Primer to start off with, and then the Tooth and Coat range for the rest of the scheme. You may also notice a few freehand company markings too. While there are a few transfers in the box for some of the more common companies, I did have to paint on the majority of these myself, so if you're interested in how I approach these, let me know in the comments and I might make a shorter follow-up video in the future. Now this kind of Kitbashed video was certainly different. With other chapters, their successes are often quite varied, even if they have some similarities. But with Space Wolf companies, they're still just Space Wolves. As a result, my Kitbashes still needed to reflect their overarching heritage, whilst also demonstrating something unique to them. If you enjoyed this kind of bulk Kitbash video for the Space Marines, then let me know in the comments and maybe I could explore the successes of other first founding chapters. But I might do a little less than 13 next time. And don't forget to check out Tacticus using my QR code or link below and use the code CUSTODES for some in-game bonuses along with my own friend referral code U-61-NAP to pick up some bonus Blackstone too. And before I go, let me say a huge thank you to everyone who continues to help keep the channel going. And if you'd like to support me too, you can get early access to ad-free videos, exclusive merchandise, and even your name in the credits. Simply follow my Patreon link below or hit the join button, just like my top Patreon supporters did, who are Nail5, Adrian Ruiz, Ban Yevrian, Berserker, Dakota Gaburi, Daniel Dowling, George Kanzini Roberts, Immaterial Creations, Cornbread, Little Templar, Macho Savitsky, Matt Brower, Bollymork, Olden Time, Sam Sepulveda, Swedsman, and Tim. And my top channel members who are Alex Verne, Bon Johnson, Daniel Reese, Dave, Doug H, Guy Bazant, Lee Ely, Mark Taylor, Miso Pogon, Nerdington Paints, Omnitom, Philip Poya, S.O., Satoran, S.J. Carper, That One Tech Priest, The Sire Acquired, and Whale Tussler. So until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.
So what's up? They don't get it. I'm different. I'm the type to break through